Hello, everyone. We've added this note to the beginning of all of our original episodes of the podcast to let you know of a few changes that have happened around here and hopefully avoid any confusion for you as listeners. When we began this podcast, it was called Starseed Survival Guide, and most people called me, your host, by my birth name, Erin. Throughout the first 22 episodes, you'll hear me introduce myself as Erin, hear others refer to me as Erin, and hear many references to the name of the show being Starseed Survival Guide. In 2018, more and more folks began calling us Yaya, and in March of 2020, we changed the name of this podcast to Earthside Survival Guide to more accurately reflect our intentions for the show. For a little more of the full story of what these changes mean to us, please check out episode 23, a temple talk where we reflect on where we've been, where we are now, and where we're going. We thank you for your patience during this transition, for listening and sharing this journey with us, and most importantly, for allowing us to continue to grow and evolve. Blessings.
And as I call in the east, I walk into the stream. And as I call in the south, I bring water to my mouth. And as I call in the west, the creek swallows my chest. And as I call in the north, I am swallowed by her soul.
Greetings, Starseeds, and welcome to the Starseed Survival Guide podcast. I'll be your host, Erin Rivera Merriman, and I'm honored to facilitate a place for us to virtually gather to be seeded, activated, and germinated by the infinite well of galactic and terrestrial wisdom that is available to all in every moment. Thank you for hearing the call, for remembering that there is so very much more to life, and showing up to explore the secret, esoteric, mystical, and unorthodox pathways to liberation that are and forever will be open to you and all who seek them with sincerity. We welcome and hail to the guardians and the gatekeepers who dwell eternally in the liminal realms. We humbly beseech your assistance today in opening these portals between the dimensions so that those who have tuned in with this transmission may find themselves able to listen from a deeper place and receive the hybrid medicine and restructuring that the helper spirits who called this broadcast into being so generously provide. May you as sacred listeners hear what you need to hear and discard anything that is not of value to your own stated intentions for your life and the fulfillment of your soul's purpose in the most enjoyable, most beautiful possible way. Starseed Survival Guide is a listener-supported program, and we hope that if you find value in the experience we share here today, that you might consider offering support by visiting us online at www.activeculturefamily.com and making a purchase or donation. Many blessings to you on your journey, and we hope you enjoy the show. Hello everyone, it's me Erin, and I'm here today with Lara Valeda Vesta. Lara Valeda Vesta grew up on a 24-acre homestead in southern Oregon. She's a certified celebrant, mother, artist, and author of the Moon Divas Guidebook, Spirited Self-Care for Women in Transition. Welcome, Lara. I've really been looking forward to this opportunity to get to know you a little bit more in the next hour.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here with you, Erin.
Yay. So tell us a little bit of your story of who you are and how you came to be this ritualist, magical, educational content creator.
Oh boy, it's a long story. It might be too long for a podcast. But, definitely my magic roots are in the land. You said I grew up on a homestead in Southern Oregon, and that really informed everything about who I am and the work that I do. And I've always been a writer, and I'm a self-taught artist, and those are just threads that have woven through my life. Spirituality, there really wasn't the wealth of information that we have accessible to us now when I was growing up, and especially in rural Southern Oregon, right? Pre-internet, additional communications. We had a landline. It was like a party line phone. That was the extent of our technical abilities. And so I was always seeking spirit, though, always looking, my parents were hippies, so they had a very relaxed attitude about spirituality. And then in high school, I was drawn to church for the ritual, but I just couldn't find a foothold there, specifically because I realized I was looking for the feminine. And I now know I was looking for my ancestors. I was really seeking my roots and my roots in the land, which is where I always felt my spirit connected. So fast forward many years and a lot of life transitions, including a divorce and then long distance parenting. And I started ritualizing with my good friend Deva Munai, who is my fellow Moon Diva in the Moon Divas Guidebook, and really came home to this idea that spirituality is a constant act of creativity between ourselves and divinity, and allowing that and following that, and letting it inform our path and grow our path rather than defining our path by some prescribed notion. That just opens the world to me. So, and that really nourished me. I started using ritual when I was working with Moon Divas. We taught some workshops together in Boulder, Colorado, where Deva was living, and then also in Portland, where I was living. And I was teaching at that time at Pacific University. So I started using ritual in my university classes, and in a really open, gentle, non-threatening way. And what I saw was this, what I feel now is a missing piece culturally. We miss ritual.
We are the stars which sing. We sing with our light. We are the birds of fire. We fly over the sky. Our light is a voice. We make a road for the spirit to pass over. For the spirit to pass over.
To open and close energy, and there's something about creating that container with intention that lets us connect with each other. And I grew really hungry for more information about ritual, which guided me on the path of training as a ceremonial celebrant with the Celebrant Institute and Foundation, and eventually leaving university teaching for a time to I thought I was going to start a business as a ritualist, but the spirit had other ideas. So another step on the path, and that's following that path of ritual is what led me to my ancestors, and that's what began my work with ritualizing art and using sacred art as a vehicle for divine communication. And that's kind of where we're at today. A lot of other things.
Thank you. I think I was learning as I was preparing for the interview just how much we have in common, and just in awe of the process, because I'm kind of impulsive about reaching out to people, just feel it and go for it, and then seeing there's a lot of pieces in common, but maybe this being one of them, this bringing together art and spirituality in a way that, of course, they were never separate, but I know a lot of people feel like they need to separate them or say, well, am I an artist or am I a healer? I'm so tormented about this thing that I can't figure out which one to choose. And so I like to say, like, well, you're just putting the art back in healing arts.
Right.
It seems like you're doing a really good job of that. Um, in addition to the creativity, one thing that I was getting really clearly from your online realm is the importance of words and names and how your magic works. So I would love to hear about your name and what it means.
Yes, the name. So I was born Lara Irene Vestnes, and Vestnes is a Norwegian name. And when I got married, I was Lara Irene Vestnes Flores. And I really wondered if I wanted to take my husband's name, but I was very young. I was 22, and I felt this overwhelming social pressure to take his name. And so I did. And then when we got divorced, I realized I didn't want either of those names. And one of the things that I think we fail to question when we talk about patriarchy is we fail to question this lineage of patrilineal naming. Just to automatically, like, I'm doing a lot of genealogical work right now with my ancestors, and the women are so hard to find. They're hard to find, they're hard to track, because the second they get married, if you don't know their husband's name, they disappear. And so I decided that I wanted my own name. And I wanted a name that would be mine, whether I repartnered or didn't, or, until the end of time, I wanted my own name. And I was working with a lot of the goddesses. This was the beginning of my divine feminine, the seed story of my divine feminine adventure. And the goddess Vesta really spoke to me because she's the goddess of the hearth. And she, in Roman society, was a protector of the home and the family. And also because she was so sacred that you never saw her face. She was constantly veiled. This idea of being sovereign, being whole, and being, being the only person that could really see my own self. And so I took the name Vesta. I legally changed my name in 2008. And I went by myself to the courthouse and wore roses in my hair and danced down the aisle. And it was a transformation. My life totally shifted when I changed my name to Vesta. And then Valeda, I just was told to take this year, as I've been delving more and more into women's history and women's spirituality. I found all of these words. There's so many words for us as diviners, as prophetesses, as healers, as witches. And I feel like by claiming some of those names and relanguaging them, Valeda was a Germanic prophetess, and she is one that we know about because she was actually in the records of the Romans, and so you can read a little bit about her. Not very much, but she was really revered, and I feel like by bringing her name back into a more wide use, even if it's just by you speaking it here in the podcast, I can illuminate some of those areas that we need to take ownership of again. We need to remember our names, remember that these are names that belong to us.
That's a beautiful story. My parents did a lot of things right, despite having a lot of trauma and getting together as kids. They had certain ideas that I think were in touch with something deeper that they did go out of their way toward. And one of those was that my sister's middle name was my dad's mom's maiden name, and my middle name was my mom's maiden name. So they just had this idea that it was important to keep the matrilineal names alive. And where did they get that from? Like, who knows? And maybe about 10 years ago, I started to use my full name in every printing, in every speaking, because I'm half Puerto Rican. And in Puerto Rico, that's very common. Like, if you go to the hospital, they can't admit you until you put 2 last names on the form. So you have to make something up if you don't have 2 last names. So people get a little confused or whatever. They try to hyphenate or think that Rivera was my maiden name and Merriman was my married name, but just clear, my name's Erin Rivera Merriman. That's it.
Oh, I love that. That's so great, because then you carry that grandmother with you, then she's part of you.
I feel that really strongly, and more as time passes, and more since she passed away. It's like her essence is being refined over her time spent in the spirit world, and I'm able to hear her talking to me all the time lately. Yeah. And I think maybe part of my wanting to ask or spend a lot of time on this topic is the sense of always wanting to change my first name, and just it feels like I have a story that it'll be so inconvenient and confusing, but I really want to. So yeah, I love your story of like, I put roses in my hair, I danced down the aisle, it was wonderful.
It was almost like a self-marriage.
Yeah.
Is what it felt like. And it was my rite of passage. We don't have those in this culture. I think one rite of passage certainly was my marriage, but it wasn't me coming into myself. And when I took my name, my family was not happy about it. But it really felt like ownership. And now it's just me. Now that'll be 10 years next year. So now it's just who I am.
Beautiful. Thank you for empowering us all. If you don't feel a connection to your name, find your name. And you started to mention some of these names for the wise women, and that leads me to my next question. That's how I first learned of your work, is that a friend of mine, Amber of Aquarian Dawn, that we interviewed back in episode 11, that was called Echoes of Our Ancestors and Intimacy with Death. She had posted an image of your art, and it was this mandala of, it looks like it's behind you right now actually, but it appears to be all the names that could be found that have ever been used to describe this woman who contracts directly with and embodies this mystery and power of nature. So, witches, wise women, midwives. And this is something that we do also in our year-long apprenticeship, is we really invite people to play with the labels, and people will kind of say, well, isn't that going to feed my ego to like need to call it something? And my answer is always, well, only if you get attached to the label that you're playing with. But a creative sense of identity feels really important to me for women's empowerment, because the identities we're presented are so stale. So I would love to hear about this project, because the image is so striking, and it's clear you did a lot of research, or that it represents something really important to you. So I'd just love to hear if there's a story behind how this piece came to be, what it represents for you to round up all these words and present them as one transmission.
Well, that work of art would not be possible. I'm going to show a book now, because this is the book Witches and Pagans by Max Dashu, and she has a chapter in there called The Names of the Witches. And this book was absolutely profound for me. I actually, she spoke to one of my classes when I was in the Women's Spirituality program at CIIS, and she gave a slideshow presentation about women's spiritual leadership throughout and history as told by art, because really in prehistory, history is the written word, but in prehistory, what we have is art. That chapter just was so resonant for me, to see all of these names that women of our lineage, my lineage, and the lineages of so many others called themselves. And I wanted to see it. I say that I work at the intersection of image and word. My books are all hand drawn, and I really like to put words with images because it does a cool thing in our brain. It allows us to use both hemispheres at the same time. And so I just started, also, I wanted to integrate those names. And that's part of what art is for me. It's a process of integration. Like, I can't really know something unless I work with it on the page. And so I started drawing it and writing it. And Max says in the book, it's an incomplete list. And when it was posted on Instagram, there were women that were adding to it, that were saying, oh, well, this isn't actually the word for prophetess. This is actually the word for, this. And so I feel like it's an ongoing piece. And I'm hoping that someday I would love to integrate, because Max's book is really focused on Northern European history, but I would really love to integrate. How cool would it be to have a mandala of the names of witches from all spiritual traditions?
I would absolutely support you in that endeavor in any way necessary. That would be amazing. So since I know that you and I are in agreement that words have just a tremendous amount of power, I'm wondering how it would feel to you to just devote a few minutes here to just you reading some of those names. I have this idea that it would be activating for people on a deep subconscious level to maybe hear names from their people. Yeah, you want to do a little magic? Do you want to read some names?
I'll read it out of Max's book. By the way, the book Witches and Pagans is one of 12, what will be a series of 12. It's called The Secret History of the Witches, and she is researching all of these different aspects of women's magic in European history, and really delves into all of these places that nobody else has gone. So I'm excited for the next edition to come out. And I'll do my best with reading them. Some of them are written like in Russian and Polish. And so what I might do is just I'll read some of the ones that I can. How about that? So the first category is knower, which that's where the word Valeda comes from. Valeda is knower. Uleda, Gulet, Vilat, Philid, wise woman. Saga, sage femme, Sabia, cunning woman. Vitka, Ban Fiasa, prophetess. Spafara, Fa, Vates, sorcière, sorceress. Diviner, Bert, Divina, Divine, Dewanes, Atsi. Enchantress. Galdracona, Alstre, Lotsicha. I think I'm going to stop there.
I could listen to that all day.
Here are all of the categories for women's names. Knower, wise woman, prophetess, diviner, enchantress, healer, old woman, doer, maker, shapeshifter, faithful woman, spirits or ancestors.
When we first came here, we were cold and we were clear. No colors on my skin, till we let the spectrum in. Say my name. when it's time to pray, we'll be dressed up all in gray, but melting on our tongues and silver in our lungs.
It's really helpful for me to hear, all the mild distinctions of flavor, because I find that we calcify our identity and limit our access to gifts very quickly. And I'm not really exactly sure what the process is, or maybe it's different for everyone. There's people say, for example, your sister was really wonderful singer, so you had to be the dancer, you couldn't be the singer, but in fact we're all capable of all of those things. And so I have this feeling that it's even like related to our challenge in being in community or being in a village, is this sense of like, well, I'm the seer, so you're the clairaudient because I'm the clairvoyant. But if you can do one, you can do the other one. And I just love to, I guess it's a prayer to restore our capacity to allow all women to be whole and not need people to stay out of our identity so that we can be that. I feel like there's an unconscious agreement when women do come into community that they're like, well, this feels a lot easier for us all if we just kind of all agree that I'm the singer and you're the dancer and you're the tarot reader. But I feel the invitation of community is that everybody comes in with one thing mastered, and that being together, you could actually pass the gifts around and share the mastery and up level everyone together to like that level of completeness with the toolkit. I'd just like to see that more, and I think it has something to do with reclaiming these words. We'll see.
No, I think so too. And, it's interesting, that idea that we have to choose, because one of the things that came really clear to me when I was in the women's spirituality program is how, again, in prehistory, there was non-duality. Myth is cyclic or spiral. We didn't have a sense of linearity and duality that came with a changing psychology. That you can't be both. And we see that the friction of duality in all of the major issues today. We see it in identity politics, this idea that you have to choose. You can't be many, many things, when the reality is we all are many things. And we all have the capacity, like you said, to dance, to sing, to share. And I certainly saw this with my students. Like, their edges were constantly pressed with this idea of duality, and that categorization, I think, is one of the pieces that we really need to work to dismantle. If we're going to change culture, then we need to break apart those dualities. And every time we get that sense of, oh, I have to choose, I can't be two things. I mean, I worked with women a lot, with entrepreneurial women, doing one-on-one consulting for spiritual businesses, and every one of them wanted to just be one thing.
Yeah.
Really, they had so much to offer in their wholeness. So I love what you said about the prayer of restoring women to wholeness, though. That I hold that too. Restoring the world to wholeness, restoring our relationships to wholeness.
Yeah, I completely agree with how it manifests in the world of business, that all of the male business advice that I've ever received has been this, like, pick one thing, focus, and put all your energy behind that, and that's how you'll advance further, quicker, more, assuming that the goal is fast linear advancement. And even just well-meaning advice, don't be afraid to dig one deep well. I'm like, oh, I'm not afraid. I've got a lot of energy and I intend to dig many deep wells. Yeah. And I think that I do think that a woman's intuitive business is we are collectively figuring out how to do that. But I think the one thing that we mostly all agree on is that it's not done the same as building an industry, that an extractive industry.
I've gotten the same advice, which is to really focus on one particular thing. But when you are working with spirit and have a regular practice, I get led in many different directions. And if I follow, then things tend to open up. Possibilities arise that I never could have imagined. Whereas if I'm linear about something and do what I think I'm supposed to do, then I tend to run into a lot more barriers and limitations. And I think part of that is being, working with my feminine nature, which I've had to do so much more, because of my illness. I have to listen, and it's a little bit more of a consequence if I don't. If I don't listen, if I try and do what I think I'm supposed to do, then I end up getting sick. So if I listen to spirit and just follow, then I tend to be able to stay more balanced.
Well, I feel like this definitely relates to my next question, which comes from reading your article that you wrote. I think it was on the Spirit Weavers blog, Making the Invisible Visible, which is just such a great name because I think that is part of the role of the ritualist or the celebrant, is to pull that invisible reality into clarity and form. But in that article, you're sharing about your experiences as someone with chronic fatigue syndrome. And you mentioned how your irregular rhythm frustrates people in your life. And I have fibromyalgia, which, like I'm always saying, I'm going to come up with a new name for, because I don't believe in any of the things that are written about fibromyalgia. I believe that fibromyalgia is my guardian angel and it prevents me from living someone else's life.
Wow, yeah.
And so a lot of the things that you were sharing in that article sounded similar, and I also believe that chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia are both kind of like, I've heard it said like wastebasket terms for rounding up a lot of symptoms, where Western medicine will say, yes, we agree that you don't feel good. We can see that, but we got nothing. We have nothing to help you feel better, and we have nothing to help it, quote unquote, go away. And so to me, that's just worth like being curious and reverent to. Like, if this is something that is impossible to make go away, then it has to be sacred. It has to be that 13th fairy that's asking to be invited to the table and asking for her own seat and her own dish and her own, gold embossed invitation to be a part of our guidance and our counsel. So I guess I wanted to share with you an idea and see what you thought about it, in terms of your own experience of chronic fatigue. How does that sound?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I know you're a mother, and it's widely known that most forms of shamanic initiation are modeled after the birth experience, and that all women who have given birth have received levels of shamanic initiation that enable you to mother and parent. So in Andean cosmology, there are initiations that, as they say, cut you from linear time. So the idea that if you're a magical person or you're a shamanic person or a healer, that you would seek this out, that you would travel and you would pay money to go and be ritually cut from linear time. That is really worthy of attention to me, and because I feel like a lot of mothers talk about this idea of how their schedule was just exploded, how their time management totally changes, where 10 minutes suddenly becomes this ultimate luxury to have 10 minutes for yourself, how you're way more productive than you ever were before when you had no children because you've come to value time, but how you get things done in these tiny little increments in between visible chunks of time, and no one really knows how you do it all, and so you look like a superhero, and then you're not sleeping and your sleep schedule's destroyed. All of that to me kind of adds up to like the motherhood experience is one of these initiations cutting you from linear time. So then a lot of women have all these quote unquote health problems that started after becoming a mother that are attributed to your relationship to time changing, because they're trying to get you to go back. They're trying to like make life look the way it did before, and time doesn't do that. So the idea I wanted to bounce off of you is like, how does that feel to consider that like quote unquote chronic fatigue syndrome might have just been manifest through you having 3 children and being like so completely reoriented in your relationship to time that you can't do anything other than what you are, which is be Vesta, which is hold down the spirit of the home, not be running around out in the world. Does that feel like does this piece about time and your relationship to time be being more real and true now, and there possibly being no disease at all, like does that resonate with you, or feel like time is important element of this whole thing?
Yes, I think time, so one of the things that helps me feel well, like I love that you say that your fibromyalgia is your guardian angel, because I see that with the chronic fatigue syndrome. And really, as I look back, I've been, the diagnosis is new for me, but I've been living with these limitations for a long time. And my parenting has been, oh my gosh, my parenting has been one of the most intense and challenging experiences of that I ever could have imagined. And we have a blended family, we have long distance parenting involved, we have a child on the autism spectrum, we have co-parents who have died, we have co-parents who have abandoned their children, we have a lot of circumstances that over the last roughly decade have absolutely decimated my relationship with time. I mean, there was a year where I feel like I didn't sleep at all. I don't really have memories of that year. And my children aren't infants, now they're all teens, but in that time period, everything was turned so far upside down. Coming out the other side of it, I really stepped into more of a relationship with my spirituality than I had going into it. And I see where I become symptomatic if I look back over the last, because I believe it was in 2009 that the incident took place that started me on this path with my illness. And so when I look back, I can see I become symptomatic when I'm not able to disregard linear time.
Yeah.
So if I'm not in the flow of creation, and home and family can be very much in the flow too, but I have obligations like to my ex-husband and to, driving my kids to his house, which is 2 hours away. Those kinds of things, create structures that do aggravate my symptoms. But when I don't have those things in place, and when I can just be in the flow of creation and nourishment and rest and practice, then I begin to feel better. So it's almost like I have an internal barometer that says, okay, this is the path. It's just really difficult to live in this culture and in this familial setting with that barometer, but I also see that it's a survival mechanism. for me, because I don't know what I would do without it. I'd probably end up with some sort of something else.
Yeah, I mean, I just deeply believe, I've been saying this a lot lately, that I think one day we'll look back on this time in the same way that we look back on, like, my son saying, "Mom, why are there different bathrooms for men and women at the grocery store? Like, that doesn't make sense." And then we have this whole conversation about, like, can you believe that they used to have different bathrooms based on the color of your skin? And he's like, that doesn't make any sense, you know? So each generation is just sort of questioning these things that we thought we had to do. And I really believe that in the future, we'll look back on this time where we told everybody that it was ideal to sleep between the same hours and that everybody needed to work between certain hours, and that this was just what you do. You would, like, up during the day and you're asleep at night, like, as equally arbitrary and savage and strange, and reductionist, uh, because I have like so many symptoms of, pain and emotional disturbances and whatever, if I have to be on anyone else's schedule. And so it's like, there's really no problem. There's just, it's a problem of learning to articulate your reality. So it's like a boundaries issue. But there's no illness. I just have to be able to sleep when I'm tired.
Yes. Yes. I was talking with my mom about this. I just got back from, we spent a week in Santa Cruz with my parents and my children. And it was a lot for me because it's a lot of social activity, and that tends to wear me out. I need quite a bit of time alone. But after, and then just the travel was challenging too. But I rested for the first 2 days that we were there, and then I felt great, and I was able to kind of duck out when I needed to. And I just think about how, even 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to do that. I didn't have the language to articulate why that was necessary, and that is one of the things that a diagnosis gives you, is it gives you language to communicate to other people. And so I have to question that too, right? Because why should I need to have a diagnosis to say I need to rest now?
Yeah, that you have to have something wrong with you. You have to be sick in order for people to allow you to have your own rhythm. When really, I would also like to see is just a deep understanding that everybody has their own rhythm and everybody is capable of being extremely productive if you can allow them to do it on their own rhythm.
Yes, absolutely. And that, I think, is, I truly believe that our rhythm is entirely constructed, or at least almost entirely constructed, by capitalism. And so when we have a capitalist rhythm, we have the internal clock, we have the division of day and night, we have, this idea that we have to be productive in a very specific way, which means to actually make something or earn money, and rediscovering this period of recovery, because I was so sick in the winter. This period of recovery has allowed me to rediscover my own sense of production, which is really different from the capitalist rhythm that it's almost inside of me. It's like I have to kind of take out these sticky webs of story that aren't mine. They don't belong to me, and recreate the story of, I feel best when I listen to my body. I am very productive when I'm in alignment with spirit and the flow of the day.
Yes. You mentioned the word recovery, and these words, like recovery, repair, regeneration. I think that women will naturally, through our cyclical nature, through our moon cycles, kind of arrive at that information eventually of just, oh, I have cycles of productivity that are natural and inspired by my genuine access to creative energy, not inspired by any external forces. And then I have periods of needing, rest and inactivity and restoration and repair. And so I'm really immersed in various manifestations of what's being called regenerative culture right now. I just love that term. And I saw that you had done a talk back in 2015, maybe, called something like spiritual permaculture. And this is something that I do with clients, and I've been studying for a couple of years in my own personal love life, is this idea of designing permaculture relationships. So it seemed like, ooh, spiritual permaculture, like repair, regeneration. I'd love to hear what that talk was about. And yeah.
Sure. So permaculture is just a long time interest of mine. It started in my garden, but of course extended because those principles of permaculture and this idea of creating culture that is regenerative and self-sustaining is so magical and in alignment with earth rhythms, right? It takes us right into earth rhythms. But that presentation was for the permaculture class at Pacific University. The professor, Deke Gunderson, invites me to come out and do a spermaculture.
It is rather sexy, I do think.
Too. To do a spiritual permaculture class and really focus on connecting with the earth lineage that we all share. We all have ancestors that live deeply and rhythmically with the earth. There is not one person alive today that comes from a lineage that is separate from those beginnings. And so remembering that however many generations away you are from those ancestors, they still live in you. And I think that they can begin to guide us in relationship with the places where we live, with the spirits of the places where we live, and just really opening that to opening this idea of permaculture to the idea of spiritual permaculture, that part of spirit is rooted in the earth, in the land. It comes through the land, and it has for all of our ancestors. And so allowing the students to kind of tap into that and speak about it, and then we dig dandelions together and sing to them, which is really fun, and make dandelion vinegar. And then they have 6 weeks to let it sit, and then they eat it together at the end of the semester. So,
Yum.
And I get to do it again this year. I'm really excited. It's one of my favorite things because, I say unsuspecting undergraduates, I love that age. Most undergrads are between 18 and 24, and it's such a sweet time of coming into self, and really, the brain is still developing, and they're so open. They really, the young people of all of these generations give me so much hope because they are open, and like you said, they question these systems, and so I love introducing them to this idea of spiritual continuity with the earth, and even just on a literal level, that your ancestors are the soil. You literally became the soil, and now here we are, and we get to be our ancestors.
Amazing. Well, one of the things that I am studying, I guess, is my personal practice is really just focused on traditional mantras as a means of connecting with these goddess energies, which, as my teacher would say, are they're not archetypes, they're living fields of consciousness, and they're feminine, but also ultimately beyond gender. So to me, from that, what I really get out of that is like, it works for me in my brain to call them goddesses or think of them as goddesses, but we're really just talking about nature spirits and the different ways that different cultures have referred to them, and words that they have used, and art that they have made to uh, help them explore and share information about these known nature spirits that are known to be benevolent and care about our needs and be worthwhile to develop a relationship with. And so in my mind, this is regenerative tantra, and it's this like place where classical tantra and permaculture meet, and it just feels like you're doing something similar in this space of, you're saying, oh, it's a spiritual permaculture class, but it also sounds very much like a wise woman tradition training, and you're embodying this Vesta goddess and bringing people home, bringing people to the hearth, the ground of health and well-being. It's very exciting.
I love what you just said about the goddesses being, not just archetypes and being actual forms. And I agree with you that that they are the embodiment of things that we can't truly understand. We put a persona on things that we can't comprehend. And the nature spirits always amaze me in how they manifest. And my husband took a picture. I just made an offering to a waterfall because I live really close to the Columbia Gorge. And this waterfall is so spectacular. It's called Waslela Falls, I think. Waslela Falls. And you hike in, and it's just in this grotto. And I made a really good offering because I always listen to what I'm told to offer, and I was told to offer this amazing green amber ring that I had.
Oh,
Really did not want to give it up, but I know from history and from archaeology that making offerings to waterfall spirits is so common and really important. And so,
furthermore, making an offering of something that has genuine value to you.
yes, well, and that's, every gift is a sacrifice. Every gift you should feel it. It should be something that you're attached to, because then that energy carries. And so I had just put the ring in the pool, and these waves splashed up and totally soaked me. And I'd raised my arms, and my husband was taking a picture. I didn't know because he was up on the cliff. Well, there's a face in the image. You can see her coming out of the waterfall right at that moment. And it's just amazing to me. I feel like there's these points of affirmation where the nature spirits, we can feel them, and we can propitiate them. But then when they show themselves to us in our form, then we can understand, oh, this is real. And I don't know why it's so hard for us to see the non-human as real, but it gives us a sense. For me, she was very real, but then when he saw the picture, and when my children saw the picture, they were like, whoa.
I do have a theory about this, like anthropomorphizing of divinity, because it happened over time. So when we look at older cultures and we say, well, this is like a spiritist animist culture, and they will say, well, this was the shrine, and you could see that this is where everyone came, and they poured their menstrual blood on this rock. They weren't going to that rock to call in like a woman, a spirit that looked like a woman. The rock was the goddess. And like, they didn't go to the river to pray to the goddess of the river. The river was the goddess. And so I always talk about this idea of the Kali Yuga, and this idea that we're as far away from where we began as possible right now. And so where we began was in this space where we just knew, we were the knower, and we could just know the divinity in these things, and everybody would show up and feed them. And as we've gone through time and we've just gone further on our journey of individuation, our journey away from non-duality or God, then it gets harder and harder to see the divinity, because we're separate. And so I think of it as a way in which spirit is very compassionate to our journey and says, God, they're really forgetting. It's really hard for them to see, so we're going to make it more obvious. And then like time goes by and we lose even more ability to see. So they're like, well, we're going to make it even more obvious. Like, you know, if all of a sudden you're looking at the rock and you see your own face, you're going to pay attention and be like, whoa, wait, what's going on right now? So I see the idea that goddesses or divine energy started showing up to people in male or female form, or in these more, you know, real world forms, as indication of creator's compassion for our state of forgetting.
Oh, that is so beautifully put. I love that. And it does seem that way. The word that comes to me over and over again as I make art is remember. You know, remember, and not just to recall, but remembering, putting the pieces back together, so that, because there are within us all of those pieces, we somewhere, again with that lineage piece within us, in our DNA, in our blood, in our bones, there lives the person who knew that the rock was the goddess. That person lives inside of us. And so to put the pieces back together, you know, where is the person in Erin that remembers the stone as goddess, right? And
she's definitely in my lower chakras.
yes. Well, and that to me feels like one of the consequences of being so far away and forgetting, you know, is our disconnection from sexuality, our disconnection from the sacred cycles of menstruation, the disconnection from reproduction. All of it is very much about, you know, the forgetting, and the forgetting our own sacrality, the forgetting that we are sacred, the forgetting that we are the goddess or the god, and that I feel like it is so big, and yet it's tucked away inside of us, this memory, and there is an activation that's happening now, and a hunger. That's what I see, even in people who are as far away as maybe they possibly could be. It's interesting with this work and with allowing myself to be more public about my spirituality, and, you know, wearing the snakes on my arms. And it's interesting to see who comes forward to ask the question. And I really believe we're hungry, and that we can start to activate more of what is naturally inside of us.
Beautiful. So where in your multidimensional being is the part of Lara that remembers that the rock is divinity, that the rock is divine being?
You know, I think that most of us are born knowing that we're born with that wisdom. I mean, you see with your son, I see with my children how they knew, and I feel, you know, when I think of home, I think of the land where I lived when I was little, and how it spoke to me, and how it was divinity for me. And so I don't think that I think that activating the ancestors, you know, part of the work that I'm doing ritually, and then also genealogically, to find out who they were and to begin to listen to them, because I feel like they've been yelling at me for a long time, and they are taking me out of just the child knowing and into a realm that is so much incomprehensibly bigger. But within me, there's always that little girl from 15008 East Evans Creek Road that would rather be outside than anything else, and who would just, lie on the tree over the creek and know that she was one with everything there. And it's such a simple thing. When I call myself back to that, it's really that easy.
So we're doing a lot of self-soul retrieval work in our apprenticeship right now, and this idea of going back into the past and connecting with parts of ourselves that may have gotten left behind or lost in the shuffle, and bringing them back to the present moment. So when I hear all of that, I hear you saying that you have a really healthy relationship with various different ages of inner children, and that in your inner child lies a deep knowing. Am I paraphrasing in a way that resonates?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. I think, I don't know, to further distill into something potentially of value to others, because, just talking with you is of immense value to me, but aware that this will be shared far and wide over time, that between you and I, the best places to look if you were to want to begin a journey of accessing a part of you that could feel the sacredness of the natural world more of the time, then your innocence, calling on your innocence, or strengthening your relationship with your inner child. For me, it's, in my first and second chakras, in not being afraid to have, at least energetically, a sexual relationship with the natural world, to not think it's weird to be sexually aroused by sitting under a tree and just feeling the tree, not layering any additional story on top of that, just sort of seeing this is a language, and I'm receiving communications in this way. And in my second chakra, in the form of the art that I make and the things that inspire me to find the energy to make art. And I feel like those are just good places to begin if you don't know where to begin.
Yes, absolutely. That idea of relationship, building relationship, you're talking about sexual relationship, and that's a part of this holistic relationship we always have. But I found that's been another huge healing for me, because I live in Portland. I grew up in rural Southern Oregon, but I now live in a city, and it's super challenging for me. But I found that by developing a relationship with the place where I live, and really allowing this place to become part of me, and for me to share myself with it, pouring my blood onto the ground, giving it my hair and my fingernails, and tending the spirits that come, and tending the trees that are here, that has opened things for me tremendously too, and allowed me to come back to that child self of, when I was little, I didn't choose to live in Southern Oregon. That was a place that was given to me by, my faith. And now my fates have led me here, and continuing just as a tool to build relationship wherever you are is a huge healing. And it also can open up that innate knowing, because that's also what our ancestors did, is they lived where they lived.
I like that you mentioned the blood offerings, and just kind of feeling that sense of some of the magic of the blood just being lost because it seems like gruesome or scary. But it's like, well, what is a child? A child is like the result of blending bloodlines. A child is blood alchemy. And you're talking about how the ancestors are in the soil, the ancestors are the soil, and that in like feeding the earth, you're continuing that like blood alchemy, that keeping the bloodline alive and fresh, and keeping the interactions fresh. There is a continuity there, and I think, if if it feels uncomfortable maybe for some people to think about, it's really not, doesn't have to be a mystical big deal. It's just a fact that this blending of DNA and recombining and recombining and recombining of fluids and hair and nails and everything, we're all kind of becoming the compost for the world of tomorrow. And like that's, I don't know, I think that should be celebrated. It's exciting. We're all in this really complex alchemy.
Yes, I think it's wonderful, and I would infinitely prefer to put my blood and my hair and my fingernails into the earth where they can be used and become something else, rather than into a plastic bag and into the waste treatment plant remain for a very long time. And I think this, what you're speaking to, that alchemy, it takes us away from this idea of human separateness. We're not separate. We aren't.
Yeah.
We are part of all of this, whether we want to be or not. Even on a micro level, I'm shedding cells as we sit talking here. My dust becomes the dust of the next generation, and so on. So to do it with intention, though, to ritualize it, to say, I give you my blood, I give you my hair, I give you my fingernails, that takes us into relationship again. It makes us conscientious of the fact that we are part of this. And then what I've found is that I don't feel so alone. In the times in my life where I'm really disconnected or isolated, I have this relationship that sustains me. I give and they give, and I give and they give, and so on. And it's really, it's been a huge part of my healing.
Yeah, I love listening to you share in your own words about these things that I also feel. I can tell that you're a really good storyteller. I bet your children loved getting bedtime stories from you every day.
Good. And sometimes they still do.
So we do have to start coming to a close in a few minutes, but I would love to just wrap up hearing a little bit of what's next for you, some things you might be working on that you're excited about, and where our listeners can find out more about your work.
Gosh, when you say what's next, I'm like, I don't know, because that's the whole story right now, is just being led. I do have a new book. I created a deck of oracle cards, and I have an interactive book that goes along with it, the Moon Divas Oracle, and that will be out at some point in time, as soon as I find the way to birth it. That's I've been seeking for a while, and it's coming. It's just a slow birth. And I just coordinated a 13-day ritual practice that was really wonderful to do. It was a big circle that shared in that practice. It was a free offering, and it's still available. You can find it on my website under the free tab. I have full text copies of the Moon Divas Guidebook available for free, and then also the 13-day ritual practice is free. And I'll be running that as a supported practice again in October, in preparation for an ancestral connection class that I was told in a dream to teach for 4 Wednesdays in November, and that will be online. And there will be more information up about that at my website, laravesta.co, in the next couple of weeks.
Well, I look forward to connecting in the future and hearing what magic comes through that portal. And just a formal thank you to you, Lara, for sharing your wise woman wisdom with us today, and to all the benevolent beings in all the realms who've gathered with us today to inspire and direct the flow of this ritualized conversation. We offer the benefits of this work to all sentient beings. May all beings be healthy, may all beings be well, may all beings know joy and not suffer. Amen, namaste, blessed be, aho, why not? May it be finished in beauty. Beloved, it's been 1,000 years. Love drying tears.